I'm just going to wait another minute while everyone else jumps back in from the project study group. Okay, the first question is regarding to noise analysis. What will you do to help lessen the noise from increased traffic along 95th between 248th and the new Wolf Crossing light? The traffic has increased dramatically, making conversation impossible on my patio, which backs onto 95th. Jim Woods from Civil Tech will answer that question.
Trying to get my video going, but I think my audio is working, so maybe that's good enough.
Yes, we have your audio.
Okay. My name is Jim Woods. I'm the traffic noise expert here at Civil Tech. Lots of questions regarding traffic noise. It's definitely one of the many environmental studies that we will be looking at as part of this project, and it's required as part of this federal aid project because we do anticipate additional through lanes will be constructed. The purpose of the analysis is first, we go out and we identify where noise impacts may occur as a result of the widening project. That is, we go out and we determine if the noise levels exceed an established threshold at the residences along the corridor based on the future traffic volumes. We do that through taking noise measurements. We'll take measurements out in the field. We'll put those measurements into computerized noise modeling. In the coming weeks, you may see some of us out there monitoring noise, and we may approach some of you along the corridor to take some measurements in your backyard. If we find out that there are noise impacts predicted as part of the project, we will evaluate the installation of noise barriers, again through computer noise modeling, and we'll do that to determine if they meet certain established criteria. They're established by the federal FHWA and IDOT. We look at criteria such as constructability, whether they can meet certain noise reduction goals. We look at cost to benefit ratios. And then if they meet all of these different criteria, we will recommend that they be constructed adjacent to the applicable homes or the residential areas that back up to 248th. Now, I think I saw a few questions about noise along 95th Street. This particular study is only focused on the stretch between the stated limits here. So we won't be specifically looking at 95th Street other than right up at the corners there near 248th. So I think that addresses most of the noise questions. If there are any others, just go ahead and type them in.
All right, thanks, Jim. Since 248th Avenue is a residential area involving senior community, what are the plans from the city to enforce reduced speed limit to lower traffic noise? Does Joel or Ray want to answer this one?
Yeah, so 248th Avenue is a arterial roadway as defined by also the federal standards as well as the city standards. So arterials are intended to carry higher traffic volumes and a little bit higher speeds. The proposed design assumes that the same posted speed of 45 miles an hour will be carried forward. Jim just talked about the noise studies, so those will be performed in accordance with the standards that Jim went through in that process.
The one house on the west side of 248th, where the sidewalk ends and foot traffic must walk in the shoulder, opposite Lansdowne Avenue. Why is this? Does the city own easement right-of-way back from the pavement? At this area, the city does own about 33 feet of right-of-way at that parcel. However, where the shared use path is ending, that is beyond where the right-of-way limits are for that at that parcel, which is why we're looking at now acquiring right-of-way to extend that path. If the 95th and 248th Avenue intersection is impeded, how will fire trucks be able to access Carilion quickly? During construction, all access will be maintained for all directions of travel. That is the anticipation for this project. We do not want to restrict or prohibit any travel during construction. Ray, Andy, do you have anything to add?
This is Joel. I will add that as part of the next steps for the project, we will be coordinating with the fire department and police department to determine their routes to different neighborhoods and to make sure that those routes, if during construction are going to be impeded, how they can modify their plans, or do we have to modify our plans for how we're going to build this roadway? So many of that will be answered once we start to coordinate with the fire departments and the police department and any other emergency vehicles that may need to get to not only Carillon Club, but also some of the other areas within the city.
All right, our next question is about the information published on the website from the first public information meeting. It appears that some of the information may not be on the website. We'll double check and make sure everything gets up on the website from both the first meeting and this meeting as well. We'll have exhibits for this meeting that will show to in-person meeting as well as this video included too. Once you complete the road and make it 2x2, it will be difficult for bicycle riders and hikers to cross the heavy traffic. Are you planning to build a bridge for the bicycle path over 248th Avenue? This is at the Tallgrass Greenway Trail crossing. Ray, Andy, one of you would like to answer this one?
I can take that one. I mean, you know, having an overpass definitely has its benefits, but we do have to think about a lot of factors. One of them is the ComEd easement. You know, to provide that overpass structure, that means we're going to have to get a ComEd easement from ComEd. We have to think about vertical and horizontal separation requirements due to those high voltage electric transmission towers. We have to be cognizant of the homes, the property owners adjacent to this overpass, especially along Birch Lane. Speaking about Birch Lane, the fact that, you know, there's Birch Lane, there's 248th Avenue. I mean, that overpass is going to get really, really long, which would take up even more space. So there's a lot of factors to think about. It's not just a matter of just putting in an overpass. There's a lot of factors that come into play here, but it's definitely being looked at right now, and we don't want to say no, but there's just a lot of things to think about. A lot of them are more complex than people realize.
Do you have comparative analysis for traffic from 111th Street to 103rd Street on 248th Avenue? I'll answer that one really briefly. Yes, the improvement that we're proposing here in both alternative 1 and alternative 2 is continuing the corridor with the 17-foot wide median from the south. And it's very consistent with that segment as well. And the traffic growth is pretty comparable as well. Would the trees be removed south of 95th and north of Grassmere on the east side of the street, easement area on the side from the fence? The location for the future sidewalk on the east side of 248th Avenue will be strategically located to minimize the impact it will have on landscaping and utilities. We're still refining our designs, and when we have our preferred alternative, we will go even further into that design and our cross-section analysis. And our goal is to maintain the trees if we can. We're not just going to take them out just to take them out. We want to keep the trees, and we'll wind the sidewalk around the trees if possible. Could we get improved fencing along 248th for tall grass? The Ray, do you have an answer for this one, or Andy?
Well, I'm a little confused by fencing. I mean, are they talking about this like a sound wall, or do they just want something more of a decorative fence, aesthetic
think-
fence? I'm
Ray,
not really sure what that question is.
Ray, I can take that.
Okay.
There's a very nice decorative fence along the perimeter of Tallgrass that was built by the developer when the subdivision was platted and developed 20 years ago. And there's easement around their property. The city does not have plans to go in there and do improvements to that. If it's to be improved, it would be by the homeowners association, not the city.
Do we know what the future access roads on the east side of 248th are going to? Ray, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so basically those two future access roads, again, they're preliminary right now, but they're related to the future Islamic Center of Naperville. So they, again, I don't want to get more into it, but they have started submitting plans and it's currently under review. So we're trying to coordinate their location of those two driveways with the phase one of the study. So.
We've gotten a couple more questions about noise analysis, and I think Jim Woods gave a pretty good answer early on that was answering most of those. Will the city build vinyl soundproof wall along 248th? I live in the Ashwood Point community and my home is next to the road. Even now we can hear a lot of traffic noise. And what is the plan to deaden the sound of increased traffic and safety of the houses close to 248th? Next question, your slides did not go north enough to show how bikes and pedestrians on Grassmere sidewalk will cross over to the east side, for example, to get to the new park. To cross over in all of the proposed improvements, alternatives, to cross over from the west side to the east side, the pedestrians from Grassmere would either go up north to 95th or down south to Trumpet Avenue and cross at the signals. Thanks for the overview. Are the future plans to convert sidewalks on the south side of 95th Street to a future shared use path? If not, what is the purpose of the shared use path on the east side of 248th as in option 3? Ray, do you want to answer this?
I can take it if you want, Ray. The city does not have plans to change the sidewalk on the south side of 95th Street to a shared use path. Basically, when we look at the shared use paths in that corridor, we really want to have the people going down the 99th Street, ComEd, and Tallgrass Greenway Parkway, as opposed to being next to the arterial road. So people within Tallgrass would move into the middle and go down that corridor. And then you can cross either at the new crossing that we'll have or at Trumpet Avenue. And when you do look at the shared use paths, we will have a continuous one on the west side of 248th. When you get to the 95th Street intersection, you can continue west on the south side of 95th Street. And then at Wolf's Cross, you can cross at the signal over to the west side and continue north from there. There's a great transportation and shared use path network out there. And unless we're missing something, we think we have it covered. We'll gladly hear or listen to any other suggestions that anyone has.
Thanks, Bill. And I will add that that alternative was developed based on input from our first public meeting as well. We heard a lot of people like to use the path and they wanted to see more paths. So one of our alternatives did include that, so we could also look at that. What is the size of the potential rectangular flashing beacon on 248th? Will pressing the button stop both sides of traffic, or will there be another button to press? The RRFB will signal traffic in both directions from one push. and it will notify drivers in both directions that a pedestrian is at the crossing. And the signage for that is about the size of a typical sign, with the lights that are going to be about 2 feet wide or so, that flash really bright. They're LED lights, and they really do a good job of notifying drivers of that a pedestrian is there. Compare traffic counts at trumpet signal versus the original estimate. We have not compared that yet. With the construction of the improvements within the area, we will look at that after the construction in the area has been completed. What is the crash danger of decreasing the size of the median from 17 feet to 11 feet and increasing more lined roadways? Joel, you can jump in if you want for this one. I can get us going on the answer. With the 17-foot median, cars turning onto 248th do have the option or opportunity to complete more of a 2-stage crossing, where they can pull out and kind of stage themselves in the median before continuing and finishing their turn.
I think another part to that is, you know, when you have an 11-foot median, if you're in a left turn lane along 248th Avenue, there's a little bit of a buffer between the through lanes, oncoming through lanes, and your vehicle in the left turn lane. So with a 17-foot median, there would be a little bit of a buffer median for a little bit of driver error or whatever. So that's another part of it. I think another part is having a wider median at the Tallgrass Greenway trail crossing. So having a wider median there gives a little bit more, at least if it were me, I would feel a little safer with a wider median if I had to make that two-stage crossing there as well. You know, there could be a lot of people using it, so more room in the middle for that as well would be better.
How will the city offset sound impact due to doubling the traffic flow? Noise pollution from pushing the traffic closer to the homes in the Tallgrass subdivision. This question was answered previously by Jim Woods, one of the first questions we answered with the noise analysis. What thoughts have you put into the alternatives on how this would impact the lives of homeowners whose houses back to the street? Road noise, increased pollution from 2 lanes, tire dust that increases.
I can take that one. This, you know, and the city can jump in too, but this road improvement has been planned as part of the road improvement part of their road improvement plan for, I believe, over a decade. So as part of this study, environmental impacts such as noise, as well as pollution, those types of things will be evaluated in our next steps.
Why is it necessary for a 17-foot median? The 17-foot median was developed based on the segment of 248th to the south, and that is providing corridor consistency, driver familiarity as they travel from one segment to the next of 248th Avenue. Tallgrass Trail Crossing is an overhead pedestrian bridge not feasible option to avoid any accidents or traffic disruptions. And I think Ray did a good job answering questions about a pedestrian overpass for the trail crossing. Have you assessed the impact of this on the value of properties that are backing 248th Avenue? Ray, Andy, Bill, someone from the city want to answer this one?
I can answer it. Basically, impacts to home values are not something that's formally done as part of a phase one engineering study. When these subdivisions were platted and developed, the city spoke with the developers about providing buffering, such as the nice decorative fence and landscaping that's out there with the developers, and encouraged them to do that. So knowing that the roadways would be widened and what the final solution out there would be. So that is not something that is considered as part of the these studies. And for the most part, the buffering that exists throughout the city adjacent to the arterials has done a great job of retaining property values, especially in Naperville. During the recession, everyone's values dropped, but ours rebounded much quicker than everyone else's. And Naperville, especially residential properties, have always held their value very well.
All right, thanks, Bill. Why do we need an 8-foot trail on the east side in alternative 3 versus sidewalk, considering a trail on the west side and it would save trees and money? The alternative 3 was developed based off of feedback from public comments from a public information meeting number 1. We missed the first half of the presentation. Can you provide details on where the recording will be? Thank you. Details will be provided on the project website, and we will make sure that all the information from this public meeting as well as the first public information meeting are all on that website. Is it a possibility to create an additional option and just solve the trail crossing issue without having to widen the road, damage the landscape, and remove mature trees? Based off of the traffic analysis, the roadway will need to be widened to 2 lanes in each direction. With the traffic growth, the delay for a vehicle turning out of the side streets would increase a lot, and cars would be waiting a really long time if 248th were only a single lane roadway. Joel, Andy, do you have anything else to add? Ray?
No, I think you handled it pretty well there. Actually, yes, I do have one thing. Something about damaging the landscape and removing the mature trees. That's something that is always looked at as part of, any roadway improvement or any transportation improvement, infrastructure improvement is to, we try to minimize impacts. And so we're trying to benefit all users. So we try to look at vehicles as well as pedestrians and bicyclists. So we're trying to figure out what our options are and what will be best for everyone. That might mean that some people aren't happy or whatever, but we're going to try to keep them as many mature trees as we can, minimize impacts to the landscape, and trying to provide, a safe corridor for both for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists.
If our citizens would like a faster route north and south, they can take Illinois Route 59. 248th Avenue is, we already discussed this, it is identified by both the city and IDOT as a minor arterial, and that's geared more for regional travel. Go ahead, Bill.
And what the city's discovered decades ago is basically we really need to have arterial roads spaced on 1 mile centers. You look at 248th, Route 59, Book Road, Plainfield, Naperville. And even as you go on the east-west streets, you look at 111th, 103rd, 95th, 87th. So trying to go without having that ends up putting more congestion, more speed in the neighborhoods and along the local streets through there. So that's why we feel the need and confirm the need that this really needs to be it is an arterial roadway.
Will there be any means to regulate traffic and not permit big vehicles like 18-wheelers, as this would create a lot of noise for residents, especially with engine braking? Someone from the city want to handle that?
Sure, I'll take that one. So we do have an established truck route system in our area. 95th Street and Wolves Crossing, I believe, are on the truck routes, but I believe 248th is not. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be trucks on 248th, because we do have to have, trucks for people to move in and out of their homes and that kind of thing. So, but, as a regular, through route, we're not anticipating changing 248th to a truck route.
What planning is going into the building of the mosque on the east side of 248th, south of Lansdowne?
I can take that one. So, our consultant Civil Tech, they're coordinating with the developers, engineers, with the location of those two driveway entrances at this time. So.
All right, thanks, Ray. A couple more noise questions. Are you planning on building sound barriers for houses along 248th? Will there be a provision either by the city or HOA to increase the roadside fence height to lower noise due to increased traffic? Both of those questions were answered earlier by Jim Woods, one of the first questions we had. Will you be requiring any personal property on the east side of 248th? Based on our analyses, there wouldn't be any permanent right-of-way acquisition at this moment on the east side of 248th Avenue. There would be some temporary easements for grading outside of the sidewalk or shared use path.
I think just one more thing is that we do need to go into our drainage analyses and go into more details of the improvements, and it really depends on what alternative is selected, whether we would need any personal property or permanent right-of-way acquisition on the east side. So at this time it doesn't look like it, but we are going into more details to firm that up and make sure that we can actually build this project and get the funding for it too from the feds. So,
is there any consideration for a right-hand turn lane on the westbound 95th Street into the Caroline Club? With these alternatives, the intersection improvements, we haven't quite looked at them fully yet, since each of the alternatives would have the same treatment for these intersections. When we select our preferred alternative, we will go into further detail on the analysis of the intersection and determine if additional turn lanes are required at any of the legs.
So Jim, just to confirm, part of your study does require an intersection design study for those major intersections, 103rd and 95th. And that's where you would look at whether a right turn lane into the Caroline Club is warranted or not, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We would also, Bill, and anybody else, we would look at other signalized intersection at Trumpet too, to see how that's operating. Obviously, the traffic along Trumpet is a little bit less than 95th, but we would still need to look at that since number of lanes are likely changing. There might be some pedestrian accommodations, some different things. So we'd have to look at that one as well.
Does the traffic analysis show a grossly different pattern for driving on 248th between 103rd and 95th Streets than when driving from 111th or further south to 103rd Street? The section south of 103rd Street is outside of the scope of the project, and we don't have data readily available to do a valid comparison between the corridors. And how is this different from crash, et cetera, percent-wise? Again, that's outside of the project limits, and we have not looked at comparing the crashes of the two corridors. Can option 3 have a 5-foot sidewalk on the east side like the other options, which would minimize the landscaping impact? Also, sound barriers were not addressed. Is that still a consideration? And if so, would it be also go around 95th Street to Wolf's Crossing The drag racing is quite loud. All those noise questions have been answered. And yes, with option 3, alternative 3, we could switch out that shared use path on the east side for a 5-foot sidewalk. And that's part of why we presented it. We like to hear the public's input and see what the public likes to have on their roads. Do we get a vote? If so, I vote for alternative 1. We do not, this is not a vote on which alternative gets the most votes will be built. We value the input of the public. We take it into consideration. And it's ultimately the decision of the city and IDOT and FHWA, since they all will be reviewing the design and the report. Why not just put in right and left turn lanes and put a bridge where the crosswalk is? The ultimate goal of this project is to bring the stretch of 248th Avenue up to city standards. This includes 2 lanes in each direction. Even though there are benefits to putting a bridge over a crosswalk, there may be many issues to think about, including the ComEd lines, as many other things that Ray discussed earlier. Is it possible to add east side shared use path to option 1 and/or option 2? The short answer to that is yes, it's possible. The long answer is there would be more impacts, especially in alternative 2 when we're shifting the roadway. Adding the shared use path is adding more space on that east side, and that would likely increase the need for right-of-way acquisition. I am in the Ashwood Point community. Will we get soundproof fence? That was answered. It's to be determined. It was answered earlier in Jim Woods' noise answer. With option 3 and expanded usage versus shared use path versus sidewalk on the east side, will it eventually extend across 103rd Street toward 111th? As Bill answered earlier, there's no plans to extend or to connect shared use paths. That alternative was developed based off of feedback from the public information meeting number 1. Can you put a stop sign at the intersection of Arrowwood Road and Nannyberry Street? I believe that intersection is outside of this project study limits.
Just to jump in on that, Jim, that would
Sure.
be something they can make that request to the city, to Andy or Ray, and we can get it to our transportation team and they would take a look at it and address it. Okay.
Thanks, Bill. What was the asterisk near alternative 3 on the comparison chart? What specifically is the impact to the landscape with alternative 3? Alternative number 3, wider trails seem safer to walkers sharing the path with bicyclists. To construct a shared use path, and since we are using federal funds, there are certain design criteria that a shared use path must have compared to a sidewalk. The shared use paths need to be designed for bicyclists traveling at 20 miles an hour. So the curves, the profile, we're basically designing a mini roadway when we design a shared use path. So we can't make the tight turns that a sidewalk can make. And there's a lot more impacts to the landscaping because we are unable to avoid or get out of the way of the landscaping. In addition, a shared use path is required to be a minimum of 5 feet from the face of curb. So that takes up a greater space as well in the parkway. Will the existing power poles on the west side of 248th need to be relocated? If so, can they be buried and the poles be removed? The city will investigate if it's feasible to bury the existing power poles. Factors such as existing underground utilities and costs will play a major factor.
Those power poles are actually owned by Commonwealth Edison, and if they need to be relocated, they will move them further away from the road. If the city were to request that they be buried, the city has to pay for that, and it's at least a minimum of $1 million a mile, if not a couple of $1 million a mile. So it's something that would have to be prioritized citywide. And there's miles and miles of overhead ComEd poles throughout the city, so it would have to be something that is looked at throughout the city. So I honestly do not have high hopes for that, but something that can be looked at.
The Tallgrass Greenway path is heavily used. There should be signs for motorists on 248th that say be prepared to stop for pedestrians, as cars tend to speed on this road. There are also many bicyclists on the path, especially serious cyclists who travel at great speed. Will the offset crossing be difficult for cyclists to navigate or too crowded at the median? Proper signage will be investigated and evaluated during phase 2 after the phase 1 portion of this project. Also, be addressed the cost of the footbridge, even if that's not a possible consideration. I think Greg mentioned earlier the cost of a pedestrian bridge would be millions of dollars. We do not, that is just a preliminary estimate, and it would be a really large cost since the structure would have to span quite a big distance.
Jim, do you want me to kind of take over here for a few? Give your voice a break. What are Naperville standards for acceptable noise decibel levels? Are there any? Do you have comparative analysis how many more decibels of sound pollution will be introduced to the people living in the homes backing 248th Avenue? Or we really don't care about that? I think Jim answered portions of that, but he could maybe expand on that just a little bit, just to give you a little bit more information.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joel. So again, this is a federal aid project, so we are subject to federal and state criteria here. So the Federal Highway Administration defines a noise impact when the traffic levels are 66 decibels or greater, and that would be measured, and I'll say averaged out over the 2 peak hours, either the morning or the evening commuter peak hours. So if it's 66 decibels averaged over those hours, then a traffic noise impact will occur. To put 66 decibels into perspective, that's roughly the equivalent of 2 people sitting across a desk from each other having a normal conversation. So that 66 decibels is kind of intentionally set to, you know, if the traffic is so loud that it interferes with conversational activities between 2 people, say on your back patio or your deck, then a noise impact would be defined there, and we would have to evaluate noise barriers in that situation. And we will look at the modeling is going to tell us what the noise levels will be after the traffic growth happens and the improvement is in place. So we will be modeling that with the FHWA approved traffic noise model. So it's going to take into account the traffic growth and everything. So we definitely care about it, and we'll look at it.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Why not just put in right and left turn lanes and put a bridge where the crosswalk? I think we answered this earlier. What is the planned speed limit going to be? The planned speed limit is going to remain 45 miles an hour, the same as it is now. There's studies that need to be done if the speed limit was going to be lowered, but based on what we kind of know from the speed, it's likely going to remain the same, and it will remain the same. Another question, I think this was another question, was the same question that just happened, that we just, the noise question. Do the proposed alternatives take into consideration the potential of more traffic with a new park that is under construction at Trumpet and Wolf's Crossing? So when we do ask for traffic projections, as we mentioned in the slides or in our presentation, the 2050 traffic projections that we receive from CMAP uses future land use maps, population growth projections, and many other factors to determine that. So yes, it does take into account future land use and those types of things when we look at the future traffic. Will noise barriers replace the current wooden fences? I'm not sure if maybe Jim can, and maybe the city can answer that one.
Yeah, well, I can start it off, then I might ask for the city's input. I think the question, I don't know if the question meant, will there be noise barriers? I think I explained that we will definitely do those analyses. Will they replace the current wooden fences? I think it depends on if those wooden, let's say a noise barrier was going to go up and it was proposed and there's already an existing wooden fence. Somebody might need to tell me on the team here, are those wooden fences on private property? And if so, you know, does the city allow the residents to tie their side fences into the noise barrier? I think it really depends also, I should say. We're going to do our best either to put, well, I should say in most cases, you like to put the noise barrier right up against the property line. It's the most effective location for a noise barrier, either there or right up against the roadway. And most likely in this case, if noise barriers were recommended due to drainage and utilities and other features, the sidewalk, the trail and everything, it's most likely the noise barrier would be up near the right-of-way line. Maybe someone else can.
I can jump in there, Jim.
Okay, Bill, thanks.
The existing decorative fences on the property owners or the easement for the homeowners association, it is not in the public right of way. It is right adjacent to it. If a noise barrier is warranted and the city decides to proceed with it, we would work with the Tallgrass Homeowners Association to figure out if they wanted to keep their fence up or if they wanted to take it down. And I'm sure they would work with their residents relative to that and figure out what the residents' preference is.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Follow up to question, another question that this attendee had, is there additional planning needed when the mosque is built? I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I know that there is a traffic study that it needs to be completed. I'm not sure if it is. That does take into account the traffic that is generated from the mosque, and that will be looked at as part of that development. Ray, do you want to jump in and see if there's anything else that you want to add to that one, or was that good? No,
that was good, Jim. Joel, thanks.
Jim, Joel, we have a bunch of J's over here at Civil Tech. Jim, Joel. So will we retain the traffic light at 248th Avenue and Trumpet Avenue? The traffic signal will remain in place. However, depending on the preferred alternative, will depend on whether some of the traffic signal equipment will need to be replaced. So that's moving forward. There's a lot to this question. Thank you very much for providing such a detailed question. We really like all the feedback. We've got a lot more questions to answer. We're a little over halfway through them. So thank you for a well done presentation. It was succinct and understandable. With respect to the trail crossing, we have the designers considered. One, the crosswalk is heavily used by cyclists, not just used by pedestrians, runners/walkers. The proposed configurations could be dangerous for cyclists and pedestrians. The risk and volume at the crossing may increase due to the new field or the park being constructed on Wolf's Crossing. Two, the RRFB proposed may not be sufficient to stop traffic. Now 4 lanes, not 2. As it stands with 2 lanes, traffic does not consistently stop now as no red flashing light is provided and the light is too close to the crosswalk. 3, pedestrians and cyclists should have stop or yield on the path to ensure that they do not right or walk through the intersection. 4, to add $500,000 to $1 million to the project as consideration of a tunnel like the Route 59 train station or overpass like Route 59 at the under end of the path have been considered to avoid intersection of cars, bikes, and people. Whew, that was a good one. So there was a lot in this question, and we have answered a lot of that. An RFB in pedestrian refuge island is the recommended mid-block crossing treatment for the future traffic volumes, as well as the roadway configuration. This provides a safe crossing with adequate space in the median for bicyclists. Just from, and I'll just add a little bit to that. 500K to 1 million for an underpass or a tunnel or an overpass. We've gotten some. My guess is that it's going to be much, much higher than $1 million. We've had some experience with that. Civil Tech has. The length of each of those is going to be very much longer than we've ever done. So the million is probably, I would say you could probably, you know, I won't say a number, but it will definitely be a lot more than $1 million. And I think Bill wants to jump in here. Maybe. Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, we put a tunnel under Washington Street at 75th Street years ago, and it is much more expensive than that. The other issue with this location is the City of Naperville Electric Utility has a buried underground duct bank that runs along the west side of 248. So we would have to go much deeper than normal in order to get underneath that electrical duct bank. And so it would be a rather deep tunnel, and it would also have to be long before, in order to have a slope that comes out of that tunnel and get back up to grade before the next road to the west. So it's, while it's much better relative to impacts on the adjacent homes, it would actually, probably be tougher to build because of bringing the grade back up. And I don't know if we'd be able to hit grade within standards before we hit the next road to the west.
Yeah, I can just likely not with the distance between Birch Lane or Birch Avenue and 248. So we'd have to go underneath both likely. And there's a safety factor with tunnels because of lighting. So it just, once you get to a certain length, it just doesn't feel safe for people to go underneath. So there's a lot to that question. That was very well thought out, and we appreciate that. Would you consider some other type of crossing for the shared use path? As a frequent biker, it's incredibly unsafe right now to cross 2 lanes of traffic, even with the flashing signal. I'm afraid crossing 4 lanes, even with the offset safety area in the median, crossing would be very unsafe. Maybe a precast concrete underpass can be considered. So, you know, we've answered that already. Has the homeowner west side at 248th and Lanza already been approached about right-of-way? Is a dispute expected? We have talked to that homeowner, and we're going to continue that coordination as we move forward. As part of the federal process, and if we're going to use federal dollars, we're not allowed to negotiate right-of-way during the phase 1. This has to happen in our phase 2. So our approach to phase 1 is to get the information out, coordinate it with as many people as we can, especially the people that are going to be impacted, and then keep that coordination going throughout the rest of the project. Is a 2-lane one really the solution, or a single lane solution with a proper planning may provide a better value? You know, I think this goes back to when we discussed the roadway as a minor arterial, some of the things that some others from Civil Tech as well as Naperville have discussed. What is the projected cost of each of these alternatives? What will be the projected financial implications be for us, the taxpayers? The cost, we have not done construction costs yet for this project. We try to get public input on the alternatives to see what are the best solutions. And then what we do is we go after federal dollars to offset those costs. So federal dollars, let's say this is, you know, let's say it's I'm not going to put a number out there, but federal dollars can range anywhere and pay for about 75 to 80% of the total cost, depending upon what those costs are and what those are. So as far as the taxpayers, you know, maybe that's something that maybe the city can say, but typically that is usually these projects are built into their capital improvement plans and have been budgeted through the city council. in order to be able to pay for that local match or that other 25% or 20%. Go ahead, Bill, or did you unmute?
I was just going to say you answered that very well. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
hey,
it
thank
is
you.
budgeted through the city's capital improvement program, which is considered each year with the annual budget.
Okay. And in regards to landscaping, I have nurtured the 2 trees, 36 years old. I also have put in new bushes and fencing, so I don't want to have traffic in my front yard. So as we've mentioned, we intend to minimize impacts to trees and landscaping as much as possible. So for those that are, I think we will be in touch with some of those property owners that we will be impacting in the near future. Does the traffic counts take into account the new development planned on the east side between Lansdowne and Lap Lane? Will there be a left turn lane going into the new development? I think that's something for somebody from the city. Ray, maybe, or Andy?
Andy, I can take this one. So, I mean, right now it's in the planning stages, right? So whether there's going to be 2 left turn lanes or 1, that's something that's still being analyzed and discussed and coordinated with the applicant and with the developer. So it's still moving forward, but right now it's up in the air whether we're gonna, grant 2 or 1 left turn lane, and the location of those driveway entrances are still being planned as well.
Okay, thanks, Ray. What speed limit is anticipated on 248th from 103rd to 95th? That road is driven pretty aggressively as it is. With the path crossing presenting a pedestrian and cycling risks, is there any plan to reduce speeds? We will be maintaining the 45 miles an hour along 248th Avenue. My preferences are alternative 1 and alternative 2 in that order. I don't like alternative 3. Well, thank you very much for the input. We'll remind everyone that you can email comments. There is, do we have that up on the screen? Why don't you go to the next slide, Jim, and we can show how we can, if your question wasn't, if you forget a question or you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about this, you can, there's many ways that you can still provide comments to us. Our comments will be taken through the end of September in order to be included in the report, but we'll take comments at any time throughout this study. So you can email Ray, you can print this out, a comment form that we'll have up on the website, and you can print that out and send it in by mail, any way you want to do it. We'll keep taking comments throughout this process. Okay, moving on to the next one. Will the current sidewalk trees on the west side between honey locust and trumpet remain as it is in either of the alternatives? Will the electric poles in this section be shifted further on the west side towards the houses, or will it remain in the same location as it currently is? Jim, Tibble, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think with both alternatives 1 and 2, there were some locations where the shared use path was being slightly relocated or realigned with the winding of the roadway. We needed to provide the 5 feet separation between the path and the roadway. And as we mentioned before, as we are going through these alternatives, we want to minimize and reduce impacts if we can. So if we can maintain those trees, we definitely will try to do that. As far as the electric poles go, the utility relocation is developed. The plans are developed in phase 2. So as this project progresses, we'll get a better idea of what the utility poles are going to be, where they're going to be relocated, or if they will be.
Okay. Are there plans to provide a 2-lane road for 103rd Street as well? If not, why not? Will help egress traffic to Route 59 rather than make 95th Street the bottleneck. So this, the 130th Street, that corridor is outside of the limits of this project. I'm not sure if there's anything else from the city that they want to add to that, but I don't know if there's future plans for that or not.
Well, I could take this one. So yeah, we definitely have plans. We definitely have plans for 103rd Street. So it was recently resurfaced last year. So it's in pretty good shape. So, you know, the fact that it's resurfaced, I mean, that road should last us for at least another maybe 10, 15 years. So at the earliest, maybe starting design engineering in probably 2029, around that time. But, you know, the near term, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So it's in good shape right now.
The other thing is 103rd Street is classified as a collector roadway. So it would basically have one through lane in each direction with a center left turn lane.
Many residents purchase new homes on 248th Avenue with the hope of a peaceful neighborhood. Widening 248th Avenue would reduce, I believe it meant reduce home values due to more traffic. That was previously answered by both Civil Tech and Naperville. What speed limit is anticipated on 248th from 103rd to 95th? That road is driven pretty aggressively. With the path crossing presenting pedestrian and cycling risks, is there any plans to reduce speeds? This was answered previously. It'll remain at 45 miles an hour. Looking at reusing the existing traffic signal equipment at 248th Avenue, are there plans to change how that intersection works? So the signal equipment was installed with the intention of widening that roadway. So not really, I guess, maybe need to expand on what we meant by how the intersection works. Generally, no, it's not going to change much. There's going to be, more lanes along 248th Avenue, but we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in our next steps. Given that most of the 103rd to 95th Street stretch is not lighted, has consideration been given to ways to mitigate light pollution at night along the road, particularly for homes that are along 248th? Is there any way to eliminate or reduce the extensive lighting? There's a couple things. Lighting will be analyzed in detail, much in detail later on. We do have to stick to the Fed FHWA and IDOT standards for lighting a roadway. We can get into more of that. We might need a little bit more time to answer that. I know there's ways to reduce, I guess, I'm not sure the exact technical answer, but if we're trying to light the roadway, the way that lighting works now than back maybe 10, 15 years ago is that you can really light just the roadway and not other areas. Then they have, LEDs and there's directional things, but so there's ways to do that, but that will have to be looked at in further detail later on. Let's see, even if the traffic light equipment at Trumpet Avenue are reused, are we able to get traffic sensors installed on 248th Avenue to enable faster left turn from Trumpet onto northbound 248th, where there is no cross traffic on 248th? Currently, we often have a long delay waiting for left turn signal, even though there is no traffic on 248th. Maybe either Ray or maybe even Andy want to take that one. I can answer it, but
sure, I'll
you
take
have some history with that.
Sure. So, so the signals on at 248th and Trumpet, the signals are, they run different programs at different times of day. They are designed to give more green time to 248th, as that is the more major arterial or minor arterial in this case. So it's going to get more green time, and Trumpet is going to be more of a side street. So you will typically have to wait longer for to get get the green ball on Trumpet. So I mean, we can certainly take another look at that, but in general, you are gonna, when you pull up to 248th from Trumpet, you are probably gonna wait anywhere from 30 seconds to up to 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. This is a longer one, so bear with me. The earlier slides, I think, showed an increased traffic pattern on 248th Avenue in the coming years. With the roadway improvements proposed, there will be less restrictions on that increased traffic. Most of this traffic will flow onto 95th Street. There's already an increased amount of traffic and motor vehicle noise due to the recent realignment of Wolf Road and improvements to 95th Street west of 248th and the two new communities, plus expected increased traffic from the new community sports park on Wolf Road. What measures are being proposed to reduce traffic speed and motor vehicle noise on 95th Street? Excuse me, especially late at night, there seems to be many motorbikes, hot rods, or modified mufflerless streetcars racing on 95th Street. Mitigating options should be considered as part of any 248th Street improvement plan. Are increased height sound walls on 95th Street an option, or new higher berms, or at least an always stop sign at Tallgrass Drive that will reduce the speeding or constant acceleration? I know the noise question has been answered. Maybe Jim Tibble or Jim Woods can take the traffic part of that.
Yeah, well, just a little bit on the noise. Again, I mean, obviously I hear them in my neighborhood, the hot rods, the mufflers, the motorcycles and such. Unfortunately, right now, the FHWA analysis process requires us to again, look at that hourly equivalent sound level that's averaged out over the peak hours. But FHWA does know that's an issue. And, but again, right now it's, you just look at that one average noise level over the peak hour. You see, there was a lot in here. Regarding speeds, not to get too deep into noise, but reducing the speeds can lower noise levels, but it takes a very significant reduction in posted speed to make a noticeable change in the noise levels. I forget what it's posted 45 out here. I mean, really to make a noticeable difference, it would have to be lowered. I mean, probably half that before you would really notice. So a lot of times reducing the speed is not a feasible option.
Can I jump in, Jim, with reducing the speeds? Having the narrower lanes, 11 feet compared to 12 feet can also help reduce speeds.
That is true.
Yes, and just to jump in on the hot rod noise, that is something that we've noticed citywide throughout Naperville during this summer of 2020, with people being stuck at home for a good part. It seems many people are out with their louder vehicles at night, and throughout the city of Naperville and many communities, it's been an issue in 2020.
All right, it's me again. Will there be a noise wall, at least where the left turn lane is planned, as the traffic stop slows down and accelerates? I think we answered that the noise studies are going to be looked at as we go forward.
Yes, and the models do account for accelerating vehicles away from the traffic control device, such as a traffic signal or a stop sign. So it does account for that acceleration of the vehicles that are out there.
All right, thanks to everyone for still sticking with us. We have just a handful more of questions to get through here and comments. Has consideration been given to combine alternative 1 and 3 to allow for east and west paths, but have reduced lane size and maybe speeds of alternative 1 and the paths, which might allow alternatives crossing 248th for pedestrians and bikers along the corridor? Standard concrete sidewalks do not seek suitable for the usage in the area. With alternative 1 and alternative 3, adding, like we said before, adding a shared use path on some of these with the wider median, we do have requirements for the offset of the path, which may require additional right-of-way acquisition as well. Some other things we consider when we look at the paths, are they connecting to somewhere? Obviously, there's the path on the west side, but corridor consistency to the south, there isn't one on the east side And we wanted to develop this alternative to address the public comment. Do the 2050 vehicle numbers include the increased vehicles that the new sports complex may bring to 248th? We answered that earlier, but yeah, the 2050 numbers are developed using proposed land use maps, population growth. It takes into account so many things that I can't even understand all of them to develop these numbers. And yes, it does include the new sports complex. Will the electric lines remain on the west side between my house and 95th Street? The electric lines may need to be relocated, and they would be relocated dependent on where ComEd needs to relocate them. It would probably be on the west side. However, they may move to the east side. It's still to be determined. The utility relocation typically takes place during phase 2. Are these plans taking into account the potential of high volume traffic and turns into possible future mosque? Ray has answered this earlier, and the developer does have or is completing a traffic impact study for the future traffic volumes being projected going to and from the mosques. And that's why we have that's why we are going to be investigating the access and the left turn lanes at those driveways. Will the noise evaluation be completed before and or after the added roadway with increased traffic?
I can take that. I think I kind of touched on that earlier. We'll definitely be monitoring noise out there in the field now, and then we will be modeling that existing noise to make sure that the model matches the sound levels that we measure out there. And then we will be predicting the future noise levels using the traffic noise model. So all of those analyses occur before the roadway is constructed. It all actually occurs during this phase 1 study. So the model is definitely, it's an accurate model, and it's been proven over the years by FHWA. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Most of the analysis, all the analyses occur before the roadway is constructed.
All right, thanks, Jim. Will the bike path be extended through the empty parcel of land at the northwest corner of 103rd and 248th? Yes, all the improvements, all alternatives have that path being extended on the west side from 103rd up to Arrowwood. When is the anticipated date of start and end of construction? Right now, the earliest construction is anticipated would be in 2024. And I would imagine probably 18 months would be the construction at a minimum, the construction time, 18 months to 2 years to complete.
Yeah, so that really has a lot to do with what type of federal funding is available. There's been some new rules with a couple of the federal funds. And so if the city were to apply, let's say next year for some of these funds, likely they'd have to be slotted somewhere in that time range. It really depends on the availability of the federal dollars and when that is. But a lot of times if the project's ready to go and they have funding, they'll try to find a spot for you. They want to be able to use the money and be able to move forward with projects and get them on the street and those types of things. So.
Is the road coming from Lap Lane to 248th Street going to be widened to accommodate a two-way lane on the north side of Lap? I believe they're asking about the access, the left and right turn lanes on Lap Lane. Lap Lane does not need to be widened. I believe there's about 33 feet of pavement or so out there on Lap Lane. Some of the corner radii would be widened with the widening of 248th, but there'd be one eastbound lane coming from 248th, and then a westbound lane to turn left and a westbound lane to turn right. Will there be a sidewalk built along the east side of 248 between 103rd and guessing that should be 95th Street? And yes, we are anticipating on constructing a sidewalk or a shared use path, some sort of pedestrian facility on the east side. 45 mile per hour is still a high speed in a residential area. What are the options to reduce to 35 miles an hour? As we discussed earlier, we had, this is one of the minor arterials, and Bill, jump in, it looks like.
Yes. Actually, when Napier Boulevard between Ogden Avenue and Maple was built back in the mid to late 80s, they tried to have it had a 30 or 35 mile per hour speed limit. City of Naperville wrote numerous speeding tickets out there. And when they went to court, the judges threw them out immediately and basically said that it was too low of a speed limit to have on a road with that many lanes and basically an arterial roadway. So with no support from the courts and the other issue, when you have a lower speed limit, you're going to have a large number of, you have some vehicles that obey it and others that say no way. So we're going to have a great discrepancy between the speeds of the vehicles that are out there. So the 45 mile per hour is the most appropriate limit to have out there.
Thanks, Bill. We need more trees or a fence by Ashwood Point to block the potential traffic noise. What are plans from the city? I believe we've already touched on the need for the noise analysis, and that's going to be looked at coming up. Who owns the parcel at the northeast corner of 103rd and 248th? I believe they mean the northwest corner. I've heard it is a church, but when will it be built? How long can it sit empty? Andy, Ray, would you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I believe the property owner is a church, but at this time there's no plans for development, and you know, it can sit vacant, you know, as long as the owner desires to leave it that way.
All right. Why wasn't infrastructure planned, 2-lane roadway, when the Ashwood Point and Heights subdivisions were developed? So the houses could be built more interior, like the Ashwood Park subdivision was developed. This is after the fact thinking and impacts residents. Any comment here? Andy, Bill, someone from the city, would you want to jump in?
I'll take it. We do leave that up to the developers. Ashwood Park was developed by Maycom and Crestview Builders. The other thing at Ashwood Park is they provided some of their stormwater management facilities on the east side of their subdivision because they do have the ability to store water there. The problem with the subdivision's Ashwood Point is the stormwater was going away from the east side. So trying to run the stormwater uphill was basically impossible. So they were not able to take advantage and provide their stormwater storage over there like the other, like Ashwood Parks did.
How will it be determined which alternative will be chosen? Will we get to vote on it? And the answer to will we get to vote on it is no. We, the project study group, Civil Tech, the city of Naperville, we value all this input we are getting from the public, and we take that into consideration, as well as many other factors, and ultimately it's the city that decides what the preferred improvement will be.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think that, you know, this is obviously a new way that we've done public information meetings, and to have as many attendees as we did, I think we've gotten some really good feedback, better than I think we anticipated. So I think that's a big thing for the city and us as engineers to understand what the concerns are and how we can address those. So, you know, there won't be a vote, but we do, you know, sometimes we have public meetings and 3 people show up, and we had over 160 people, you know, sign up for this one. So that's really good. And I think we've gotten a good idea of what the concerns are so far with the questions that you guys have had. So we appreciate that.
What's going to happen at the intersection of 248th and 95th at the Caroline Club entrance? We're still going to be doing further investigation at this intersection to see if additional turn lanes or anything else is required or needed at this intersection. Why 248th Avenue widening is planned without plans for noise blocker walls? As we mentioned before, we are going to be getting into the noise analysis shortly here, and that will determine if noise walls will be constructed. How about a dedicated right turn lane onto westbound 95th Street into the Caroline Club? Again, we are going to be looking at that intersection in our detailed preferred alternative analysis. There are 2 55+ communities on 248th Avenue. Do you plan on increasing lighting on this stretch of land, especially considering slower reaction time for older drivers and eyesight problems that may increase with age? Yes, all of the preferred alternatives do include roadway lighting for the entire corridor. Ashwood Point homeowners falling notice pollution even now. Tall grass homes are far away from 248th compared to Ashwood Point. We've already answered the noise analysis questions. Joel, did you have anything to add?
No, that's what I was just going to say is that, you know, it takes into account, you know, the noise analysis takes into account what the existing noise levels are as well. So that'll be part of the noise analysis that we'll be doing soon.
Is it possible to have soundproof walls even before the project gets started?
Maybe Jim Woods?
Yeah, sure. No, so if noise barriers are found to be feasible and reasonable as part of this project, as part of this study that we're doing, they will be built together with the roadway project. We're not out evaluating existing, like they'll only go up if they're found to be feasible and reasonable. And again, it's possible that they would be constructed at the beginning of the actual roadway widening, but that's yet to be seen. The contractor and the designers will figure out at what point those walls will be built as part of the roadway construction project.
Other than the home at 248 and Lansdowne that may have mature trees, most of the trees along 248th project segment are recent additions. This was farmland after all before the development. Can more trees just be planted to offset any losses? We're not talking about the old growth historic trees requiring preservation.
I was going to see if you were going to answer it, but I'll take it. Most of this will be determined in phase 2, but we do take into account what type of tree it is and how big it is in order to determine, you know, what if it will be replaced. A lot of times we try to replace them at 1-to-1. Sometimes there's not enough room to do that, so it's all really going to have to be determined mostly in phase 2.
At what phase does the right-of-way acquisition occur? That takes place during the phase 2 or alongside the phase 2. What about the driveway of the homeowner whom the city is seeking the right-of-way acquisition? Will it interfere with the shared path? The shared use path will have to cross the driveway and it will not interfere with the path. There would be some grading modifications so that the path is crossing the driveway at a ADA compliant slope, but it shouldn't interfere. As comparison, how wide is the median along 95th Street near 248th? That is widths currently on both east of 248th and west of 248th. I do not know that off the top of my head, but they appear to be 17 feet.
I don't, Jim, I don't know. We will have to pull those plans and we can post the answer on the web with all the other answers that we have there.
Is the cost of an asphalt shared path less or more expensive to maintain over its life than a concrete sidewalk? Joel, you jumping in?
No, I was just going to add that is a really good question. Unless someone from the city knows, I think we're going to have to look at that. I know that when we do pavement design to determine with the pavement structure, we can do a benefit cost analysis and how the maintenance looks, but I don't know that we've ever done that with a shared use path comparing an asphalt or an HMA path to concrete.
That is a very good question, and we maintain a lot of bikeways and sidewalks, and I hate to say we do not know the answer off the top of our head. It depends on many factors. Really, one thing that tears up trees are trees and the tree roots of the trees that have shallow roots that play havoc on both asphalt and also concrete. The city does over $500,000 worth of sidewalk repairs annually throughout the city. The problem with this, not the problem, but the issue sidewalk, we typically replace it once it meets warrants. Vertical mismatch, broken sections or spalling. The asphalt pathways, we take a proactive approach in seal coating them, crack filling them, trying to do as much preventive maintenance as we can on them before we go through and resurface them. And we've had some of those in for 20 years and have not resurfaced. But actually, we just did one that we're in the process of resurfacing a couple hundred feet of DuPage River Trail segment 3 next to some heavy trees that are causing us havoc with it. So tough question, depends on many external factors, and I don't think we can give an answer on that, unfortunately.
You've addressed the noise issues on 248th, but have brushed the noise issues on 95th Street aside. The city needs to add this to their agenda. Go ahead, Bill.
That would have to be something that we would have to be directed by the city council to address separately. It's outside the scope of this, and if the groups feel strongly, they can always address the city council.
If there's no plan to continue the idea of a shared use path on the east side of 248th to the south past 103rd, then wouldn't it make sense for it to remain a 5-foot sidewalk for least impact? More would be unnecessary and inconsistent as 95th Street is a 5-foot sidewalk, correct? Yes, and that is part of the alternative analysis. We want to look at just different options, taking the feedback from the public that putting a path on the east side was one of the comments that we got at the first public information meeting, that some of the public wanted to see a path on the east side. And we wanted to develop an alternative and present it to the public today. Is there a peak noise level requirement in decibels?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered that one already. There isn't a peak noise level per se. It is that hourly equivalent sound level of 66 decibels over the highest travel time hour.
All right. We have a comment here that they vote for alternative 3. Just want to stress again, this isn't a vote. We're seeking the input. So thank you. There are large variations to the noise decibels depending on speeds and types of vehicles traveling on 248th. peak noise levels are more of an issue than a time-weighted average decibel level? Thank you for this presentation.
Yeah, I think again, we covered that one earlier. So we're again looking at that equivalent hourly level over the peak hour per the FHWA criteria, the standards.
When do we anticipate the mosque project to begin, and will it overlap with 248th project?
I can
Ray?
take that one. Yeah, I can take that one. So right now the applicant has submitted their preliminary engineering drawings. It's currently under review. And so they would like that finished, and after that they're gonna submit for final engineering approval. But they've mentioned to us and made it clear that they would like to start construction as soon as possible. Once all the permits and all the review is done with the city, they would like to start construction as soon as possible. But for now, it's under preliminary engineering review, and in a month or two, they're gonna submit the final engineering review.
If we cannot have a bridge, then why not underpass for Tallgrass Greenway? I think we already touched on this. Joel, are you jumping in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we touched on, there's many concerns for that one. So with an underpass and an overpass, but yeah, that was answered earlier. We can, a lot of these questions will be, posted on the website, so you'll be able to see it there.
What about moving the trail crossing to Trumpet where there is a control of the light? This question is asking if we could move the Tallgrass Greenway trail crossing to the north to where Trumpet Avenue is, so the pedestrians can cross at the signalized intersection. I'm not exactly sure what the distance is to travel from the trail all the way north to the signal, but it's pretty far to travel that far, and the compliance for pedestrians probably would be very low, as that would add maybe half a mile or so to their travel just across the street. You would probably see a lot of pedestrians bypass that and cross where there wasn't a crossing, which is even a more unsafe situation. Once everything is approved, how long will it take to complete this project? As we showed in our schedule, we had the phase 1 being complete, getting our design approval in about a year. And then phase 2, a year to 2 years. And then construction beginning in 2024 at the earliest. And that construction would probably take 18 months to 2 years for the whole corridor. But there's a lot of factors that go in. That's kind of like the best case scenario. All the ducks line up for that to happen. No sound walls were installed between 103rd and 111th on 248th when it was expanded. There may have been a number of questions about noise between 95th and 103rd. Are there some facts about noise pollution in the new corridor that we need to know that would justify these questions, or that there is some expected increases in noise different from 103rd and 111th?
So I'll have to ask the city, but I'll assume that 248th used federal funding when it was widened in that stretch to the south. It did go through, is it? Oh,
Actually not. No.
Okay, I apologize.
That's all right.
There you go.
There were no federal funds that were used for that, so that's why there was no noise wall associated with it. I think the other part of the question is, do we anticipate the noise to be heavier in this section? From my perspective, I don't see it being any heavier. I think it'd be very similar. But Jim, you may weigh in better on that. But I don't see why it would be heavier in this section as opposed to the one in the south.
Yeah, I mean, if the traffic volumes are pretty equivalent and the posted speed is roughly the same, then again, it's going to have to go through the federal aid process. So maybe there's a different set of criteria that we'll have to look at here as compared to when the other stretch was widened. But you know, it's yet to be seen. We're going to do all that modeling and measurements and such. We're going to be starting that up pretty soon here. And we will be coming back to the residents if there are, I should mention that, if there are impacts and we do find that noise barriers are feasible and reasonable to put them up along this corridor, we do come back to the residents. The final piece in that is actually going to the residents and confirming whether or not they want the wall. So there will be a voting process in that regard. If a noise barrier is found to be recommended, we will come back to the residents and make sure they want them to be installed. Because not everybody wants, believe it or not, not everyone wants noise barriers. So that is part of the equation.
And if we got to that point, the city would work with the homeowners associations if it was determined to be reasonable and feasible. We would not work with individuals, but with the associations.
Yeah, and we will hold detailed meetings with the residents and the associations if it comes to that point. So there will be a lot more details on the sound, the noise analysis process if it comes to that point.
How many residents are online? We currently have 27 residents still at this meeting. When the meeting started, we had over 160 registered to attend. And I know when we started the meeting, attendance was over 100 that started the meeting with us. I don't know the exact numbers right now, but that will be posted in the meeting summary. Is it possible to get sound recording devices now to place in our backyards and start data gathering, or at least specification standards regarding how to measure it ourselves so that they can be useful for your studies?
No, for that, we use the highest level. It's called a Class 1 sound level meter. It's a very expensive piece of machinery. I know, everybody has their cell phones now, and there are a lot of apps out there that can measure decibels, but they're nowhere near the precision that's required to do the types of studies that we need to do. And I'm not sure if those apps, I have a few of them, but I'm not sure if they actually will measure that hourly equivalent sound level. They will, tell you where the peaks and valleys are, but effectively, no, we need to get out there with our equipment, and we will be doing that soon.
And when we do go out there to measure the noise, we will notify the residents if we need to go onto their property, correct, Jim?
That's correct. Yeah.
Have all the civil tech team been on site to 248th during at least peak hours of traffic and at peak path usage, morning and evenings, to appreciate actually data in relation to the proposed designs? Yes, we've all been out to the project site several times during various times of the day to walk the site. We had an on-site meeting. In addition, we also gathered 24-hour video data of the intersections and did for the traffic counts. And we have a good feel for the corridor.
Yeah, just one thing to add is when we get into the more detailed studies of the design, we do go back out to verify, what those designs actually look like out in the field. So it's more of a check for us to look at, hey, this looks like it grades this way, or it looks like there's a tree here. We go back out there and look at that to make sure that, the picture's 1,000 words, but going out in the field and looking at it is like worth 2,000 words in my opinion. So we can design it all we want, but we want to look out there and go out there. So we'll be having many times to go out there and look at the project area and how it's maybe changed over the course of the time. So
We have talked considerably about the noise pollution problem. Would you also be testing for CO2 and CO emissions from vehicle exhaust that can potentially increase? Any plans on conducting that as well? With EPA now reducing the emissions testing to every 2 years, there is a potential for increasing in general. Houses with canned air can be subjected to increased pollution inside their house from increased traffic. Any plans to address that for residents?
This is kind of a tough question. There's parts of our reports that look at noise pollution and emission, not noise pollution, but emissions and testing for that. So it's dealt with much differently than the noise pollution or traffic noise analysis. So there are certain things that we will look into when we get into the next part of this, but it definitely won't be as detailed as the noise analysis that will be conducted. It does meet all the federal requirements, the EPA, all those types of things. So it will meet all the federal requirements to be able to implement this project, but that's a really good question. So, wow, that was really, really cool actually to see how many comments and how many people were engaged with this project. That was the last question we had. Again, if you guys, the people that are left, if you have any more comments or questions, please go to the website. We will try to get everything uploaded as quickly as we can to the website. And we appreciate everybody's feedback so far from public information meeting number 1, our survey, and then the public information meeting number 2. Obviously, it's not the way that we anticipate holding this meeting, but we're glad that everybody was able to come out and listen to us for at least a little bit. So unless the city has anything to ask or answer or put in, we'll close out. Go ahead, Bill.
I think I would just echo I'd echo what you said, Joel. Thank you very, very much to the residents and the interested parties. This is a process we go through. We value the input very much. If in the end it's not the answer you were seeking, you know what, we take it all into consideration, and we do think through everything that has been brought up tonight. So, and some outstanding questions. I mean, some really, really good ones, and we appreciate them all. But thank you for your time and your interest in this project.
And with that, we will close down the webinar, and everybody have a great rest of your night and enjoy that good weather while we can. Thanks, everyone.